After my mom's funeral, my dad brought his mistress home. Then he kicked me out like I never mattered. 8 years later, I faced him again, this time in court. Not as his son, but as the lawyer who would take him down. Hello. My name is Malcolm Reyes. I'm 31 years old, a licensed attorney living in Delaware. But long before I stood in courtrooms defending the vulnerable, I was just a scared little boy trapped in a house full of screaming shadows. This is not a story I tell often, but today, I'm telling it all. Because someone out there needs to know, survival isn't weakness, it's the start of something stronger. My story began in a rural town with clay-colored roads and sun-drenched porches where neighbors waved politely, assuming our family was just another wholesome American portrait. But behind our walls, a war was always waiting. My father, Vernon Reyes, was a large man with veins like cables and eyes too quick to burn. He reeked of cheap whiskey and smoke. Every time he walked through the door, you could feel the tension crackle like static. My mother, Diane, was gentle, almost fragile, with sad, sloping eyes that never quite met yours. She tried, God, she tried, to keep us safe. But love isn't always armor strong enough. The first time Vernon hit me, I was 6. It was winter. I remember because the window had frost on it and the heater was groaning. I had spilled a glass of milk at the dinner table, just a child's clumsy mistake. But to my father, it was a betrayal. You think this is your house to mess up? He bellowed. His fist landed hard on my shoulder, knocking me to the floor. Before I could cry, my mother threw herself over me like a shield. Please, Vernon, he's a child, she begged, trembling. He didn't stop. He grabbed her by the hair and yanked her across the room, the sound of her screams echoing in our tiny kitchen. I curled into myself, hands over my head, wishing to vanish. That night, after Vernon passed out in the living room, Mom sat beside me in bed. Her hands, shaking, gently rubbed my bruises. Malcolm, she whispered, you have to be strong, okay? I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. And I didn't understand why she was apologizing. She was the only good thing in that house. I held her tight, burying my face into her shoulder. That night, I promised myself, I would grow up and save her from him. Somehow. As the years dragged on, things only got worse. Vernon lost his job at the auto shop and fell deeper into the bottle. His rage had no filter, any noise, any glance, became a trigger. Once, he threw me against a wall because I changed the TV channel too loudly. Another time, he beat my mother until she couldn't walk straight, for daring to ask where he'd been all night. She hid her bruises under sweaters, even in July. But despite it all, my mother gave me quiet moments of light. After each storm, she would take me to the backyard and sit beneath our old pecan tree. See those stars, she'd whisper. Even when the sky is darkest, they don't stop shining. Be like that, baby. Shine anyway. Those words became the small flame I clung to through the nightmare. Still, I wasn't always brave. Some nights, I hid in the closet with my hands over my ears, ashamed of my fear. I hated my father. I hated myself for being so small. And I hated the world for pretending not to see. When I was 8, my sister Eva was born. She was tiny, all cheeks and light. Somehow, Vernon treated her like royalty. Never once did he raise his voice to her. You're my jewel, he'd say, cradling her with the gentleness I had never received. I was jealous, but more than that, I was relieved. I didn't want Eva to know what it felt like to be afraid of the man who tucked you in at night. But his favoritism made me feel invisible. Once, I dropped Eva's toy truck by accident. Vernon slapped me so hard my ears rang. You made her cry, he snarled, cradling Eva while she sobbed, less for the toy and more because she saw her big brother hurt. That night, our mother hugged us both tight, her body a cage around our trembling hearts. I love you both, she whispered. Always. Always. But I could feel her breaking. I kept dreaming of escape. I'd close my eyes in school and imagine running away, just me, Mom, and Eva. But I had no plan. Just a dream. By 13, Vernon's drinking had turned brutal. He once knocked Mom unconscious. I remember screaming, trying to drag her limp body away while Vernon just stood over us, red-faced and hollow-eyed. She woke up hours later with a weak smile, whispering, "You've got to survive this, Malcolm." For her. For Eva. That's when I started my secret plan. I studied hard. I stopped talking in school, just kept my head down and tried to make myself invisible. I couldn't fight Vernon with fists. But maybe, one day, I could fight him with something stronger. I started keeping a notebook, documenting his outbursts, Mom's injuries, every slurred insult, every slam of the door. I didn't know if it would matter, but it felt like control. And then, came the day everything fell apart. I was 16. It was October. I stayed late at the library to finish an essay. When I walked through the front door, the house was eerily silent. No TV. No crying. No clinking dishes. Vernon was sitting on the couch, half asleep, an empty bottle rolling at his feet. "Your mom?" he mumbled when I asked. "She fell. Down the stairs. She's in the hospital." Just like that. Like someone commenting on the weather. My knees buckled. I ran all the way to the hospital, coatless in the cold. When I got there, Eva was in the hallway, clutching her doll and sobbing. "She won't wake up," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. I held her tight, but inside I was unraveling. When I saw Mom, pale, still, the bruises blooming like ink on her throat, I knew she hadn't just fallen. I didn't need proof. I had lived with him. I knew. The doctor told me there'd been head trauma. Severe. She hadn't made it. I didn't cry. Not right away. I sat by her bed and held her hand. Her skin was already cold. The last warmth in our house had just gone out. The funeral was quiet. Vernon reeked of whiskey. Neighbors whispered about the accident, but no one said what we all knew. I had no real evidence. My notebook? Just a teenager's scribbles. Not enough. And then he brought her in. A week after we buried my mother, Vernon invited his mistress to live in our house. Her name was Rochelle. She walked in laughing, wearing perfume that made me sick. She scolded Eva, told her to stop whining. I watched my baby sister shrink into herself, and something inside me snapped. I swore, not just to avenge our mother, but to get Eva out. Rochelle made our home feel like a grave. Not just because she wasn't my mother, but because she moved through the rooms like Mom had never existed. She stood where my mother once stood, cooking like it was her place, sitting in her chair, brushing her perfume on Eva's hair like she owned her. But she didn't. And every time Eva cried when Rochelle raised her voice, every time I saw the bruise-shaped fear in her eyes, I knew I had to act. But I was 16. I had no money, no legal standing, no strength that could beat Vernon in a fight. All I had was a promise. And that would have to be enough. One night, about a month after Mom's funeral, I came home from my part-time job at the corner grocery store. The house was dark. I heard shouting. Rochelle was screaming at Eva for spilling a glass of water. "Just like your clumsy mother," she snapped. I stepped into the room before I could stop myself. "Don't talk to her like that," I said, voice shaking. Rochelle turned, her eyes like cold knives. "Oh? You grew a backbone now? Who do you think you are, little boy?" She raised her hand to slap me. I caught her wrist midair. "Touch her again, and I'll make sure you regret it," I said, my voice flat but hot with fury. That's when the front door slammed. Vernon staggered in, eyes bloodshot, bottle in hand. "What's going on?" Rochelle didn't miss a beat. "Your son just threatened me." Vernon's rage lit up like gasoline. "You little bastard," he growled, storming toward me. He grabbed my collar, shoved me against the wall, then threw open the front door. "You want to act like a man? Fine. Get out. This ain't your house anymore." And just like that, I was in the rain, standing on the porch with nothing but my work uniform and a backpack. I could still hear Eva crying on the other side of the door. That broke me more than the shove. I wanted to run back in. But I knew if I did, I'd be useless. Worse, I'd put her in more danger. So I turned. I walked. I found a park bench and curled up under it that night, whispering into the darkness, "Mama, I need help. Please." The next morning, I dragged myself to the only place I could think of, my best friend Jordan's house. When he opened the door and saw me soaked, shivering, eyes hollow, he didn't ask a single question. He just pulled me in. His mom, Miss Gloria, fed me, gave me warm clothes, and asked me what happened. And I told her everything. She cried, hugged me like I was hers, then said something that changed my life: "You need to call someone in your family. Someone who can help you for real." So I called my aunt, my mother's younger sister, Camille. She lived 3 hours away and hadn't visited since the funeral. But she had cried at Mom's grave. I remembered that. When she answered, I said, "Aunt Camille, I need help. Eva's still in that house." She didn't hesitate. "I'm coming. We're gonna fix this." 3 hours later, I was on a bus headed to her apartment. She picked me up, wrapped me in a blanket, and whispered, "You're safe now." Her husband, Dennis, was quiet but kind. He looked at me with steady eyes and said, "Your family. We'll take care of you." But I didn't want comfort. I wanted justice. I wanted Eva. In the days that followed, I couldn't sit still. I enrolled in school, got a part-time job, but all I could think about was Eva's face, those wide, frightened eyes. One night, I told Camille everything. She cried, then said, "We need a plan." Dennis leaned forward and said, "We're going back for her. I'll go with you. No more waiting." When we returned to my hometown, it was almost noon. Our old house looked like a tomb: broken fence, uncut weeds, windows caked in dust. I walked up the steps, trembling. Knocked on the door. Rochelle opened it. "You," she hissed. I pushed past her. "Eva." Her voice came from the back room. "Malcolm." She ran into my arms, face red from crying. Her cheek was swollen. I held her like I never would again let go. Rochelle stormed in, shouting. Vernon followed, stinking of gin. "You think you can walk in here and take her? She's my daughter." Dennis stepped forward, calm but fierce. "You lay a finger on that child, and you'll wish you hadn't." Camille's voice cut through the noise like ice. "You beat my sister. Now you let your girlfriend beat her daughter? You don't deserve her." Eva whispered, "She hits me when Daddy's not looking." That was it. I turned. "We're leaving." Vernon stepped forward, uncertain. But Dennis moved too, and Vernon froze. We walked out. Eva didn't look back. Neither did I. At Camille's place, Eva finally slept in peace. I sat outside her door that first night, just listening to her breathing. That was the moment I decided. Law. That was the path. Not revenge. Not fists. Law. Because Mom deserved someone who could have protected her with more than hope. And Eva would never again live afraid. I told Camille, "I want to study law." She smiled through tears. "You're your mother's son." Dennis nodded. "Then let's get you started." I studied like my life depended on it. Because it did. In school, I met mentors who saw my fire. I applied for a scholarship. I got in. I left for college with Eva's drawing in my backpack, a picture of me holding a book under our old pecan tree. Mom standing behind me, smiling. 4 years later, I graduated with honors. Then law school. I specialized in family law, because I knew that battlefield too well. I wanted to protect kids like Eva. Women like my mom. In my third year, I interned at a law firm. One morning, my supervisor handed me a file. New case. Domestic abuse. The client's name is Rochelle. Wants protection from her husband, Vernon Reyes. I stared at the paper. My father. The same woman who once hurt Eva was now a victim herself. And I had a choice. Walk away, or do what no one had done for my mother. I'll take the case, I said. What came next? That's for another time. But I will say this. I didn't take the case for Rochelle. I took it for the people my father destroyed. For the mother who held me under the stars and said, "Shine anyway." For the little sister who waited at the window, believing I'd come back. For the boy I used to be, hiding in closets, waiting for someone to save him. He became the man who saves others now. And I know, wherever she is, Mom's proud. Because I finally came home. Not to the house that broke us, but to the promise that built me. The courthouse steps felt different that day. There was no fear in my chest, just a quiet finality. Like I was closing a door that had stayed open too long. My father, Vernon Reyes, had been convicted. Rochelle was granted the protective order she never thought she'd live to receive. And me? I wasn't just a son anymore. I had become the kind of man my mother needed back then. I had kept my promise. But peace? That doesn't come with a gavel. After the trial, I walked back into my apartment, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the drawing Eva had made for me years ago. The one with me under the pecan tree, holding a book. Our mother beside me. Smiling. Always smiling. I traced my fingers across the paper like it was sacred. Eva called later that night. "Does it feel better now?" she asked, her voice softer than I remembered. I was quiet for a while. Then I said, "It feels lighter." But not done. Because there were still too many families like ours. Too many children hiding in closets, too many mothers whispering bedtime stories through bruised lips. I had done one thing. But I couldn't stop. So I didn't. I stayed at the firm for another 2 years, handling tough family law cases, helping women get restraining orders, children find guardians, and victims navigate a system not always built for them. But the work started to feel too quiet. I needed more. That's when I applied to the state attorney's office. And I got in. I was no longer just defending clients, I was prosecuting abusers. Men like Vernon. The cases were brutal. The evidence, hard to stomach. But every time I walked into that courtroom, I carried my mother's strength with me. Every time I stood before a jury, I imagined her in the front row, nodding. Eva thrived, too. She graduated high school with honors and started studying childhood psychology. She wanted to help kids like us. "You saved me," she once told me. So now I want to save someone else. One fall, she and I drove back to our hometown. Not for court. Not for anything official. Just to see it one last time. The house had been sold. It sat there, gutted and stripped of memory. New curtains in the windows. Fresh paint. But I could still feel the ghosts in the frame. Eva stood beside me, silent. "Do you want to go in?" I asked. She shook her head. "No. I just wanted to see that it doesn't own me anymore." And it didn't. Not her. Not me. That same day, we visited the cemetery. I brought flowers, white roses. Eva placed a tiny picture of us from when we were kids next to the headstone. We sat in silence for a while. Then Eva said, "Do you think she knew we'd be okay?" "I think," I whispered, "she never doubted us for a second." Years passed. I kept working, kept fighting. I gave talks at shelters, trained volunteers, helped build a nonprofit offering legal support to domestic violence victims who couldn't afford a lawyer. Every time someone said, "Thank you," I thought about Mom. Not because she needed the thanks, but because everything I was became possible the day she said, "Be strong, baby." shine anyway. Sometimes, when the world went quiet, I still heard her voice under that pecan tree. And I still shine. You know, sometimes the loudest kind of revenge is silence. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that rebuilds. The kind that stops echoing in old rooms and starts planting new ones, ones where little girls laugh without fear, and boys grow into men who don't use their fists to speak. I never got to hear my mother say she was proud. But I see it in my sister's smile. And if my story touched something deep inside you, subscribe to this channel, where we speak the truths too many are afraid to tell. This is Malcolm Reyes. Son. Brother. Survivor. And I still carry the flame from under that tree. Every single day.